Hello once again everybody, it's Chris Bezanoy or Chris B with CSB Security Inc. with yet another informative video. Today we're going to talk about what's commonly known as the Threat and Risk Assessment or TRA in the security industry and how it pertains to the Cannabis Act moving forward. Before we go any further, just a little bit of a disclaimer. What I'm about to tell you is based on 5 years experience in the industry. It's based on over 300 applications. It's based on myself performing over 30 TRAs within the cannabis sector, and of course many TRAs outside of the cannabis sector and worldwide. So a plain English definition of a threat and risk assessment or TRA is simply this. A TRA is a formal document created by a professional that lets a client know the risks associated with their facility. It lets them know how to avoid or reduce the risks of any bad things happening. It also lets them know if bad things do happen, what's the outcome, either catastrophic or non-existent, and also helps pave the path for reducing risk moving forward should the same thing keep happening. So under the ACMPR, a little bit of a history here. Under the ACMPR, Health Canada has stated that you need to assess the risks of your facility. A long time ago, we're talking before the ACMPR, a guidance document was created by Health Canada, a draft, if you will. And it was released, I believe it was actually released without Health Canada knowing that it was. Either way, it was leaked out. And in that document, it spoke to any sensitive uses within a certain radius of a facility was frowned upon by Health Canada. At one point in time, I believe it was 200 meters of the facility. It almost became a rule that people heard about. Now, fast forward to today, it's almost 500 meters. But nonetheless, let's call it 500 meters for now. And what it basically stated was, hey, if you've got sensitive uses within 500 meters of your facility, Health Canada doesn't like that. If there's any houses, if there's any schools, if there's any churches, any stadiums, any apartment buildings, whatever the case may be, Health Canada didn't really like it. If there was a lot of sensitive uses, a lot of people in the area of 500 meters of the site. When you go to the ACMPR, the beginning stages of the ACMPR, when Health Canada said you must assess the risks associated with the site, that 500 meter rule was kind of ported in. Almost everybody did this 500 meter rule, identifying any sensitive uses in the area. Now, for a TRA under the ACMPR, a lot of consultants that were engaged by a client either went too far or didn't go far enough when creating a TRA. Some consultants went as far as to say, well, there are 20 risks associated with your facility. Here's how we recommend that you can reduce the risk. Here's how you can prevent it from happening. Send that to Health Canada with your application. You'll be okay. Some consultants went, okay, we don't want to tell Health Canada everything because we don't want to make it look so bad. We're going to identify one risk, and we're going to give you the mitigation. We're going to recommend what you can do to reduce that risk, and then we're going to call it a day, hand it to Health Canada, it'll look good. What ended up happening was that Health Canada saw a wide variety and range of TRAs, and it differed from consultant to consultant. It also differed between reviewer to reviewer and how they took those risks, if they thought it was reasonable, if they thought it was accurate, if they thought it was too much, maybe too little. The point being is that TRAs went from a formal process to a warped and heavily edited process where sometimes clients were asking the consultants to not show certain things. We're asking the consultants to not paint their facility in a bad picture to Health Canada. Or in some cases, some clients went to the consultant and said, you're not identifying any risks other than one that doesn't make sense to us. Sometimes Health Canada would come back and say, we've seen the risks you've identified. We're not quite sure we agree with that. Could you please explain a little bit more about how you think terrorism is a risk to your facility? Sometimes Health Canada would come back and say, okay, client, you're only saying there's one risk associated with your facility and it's a vehicle-borne incursion. What about other things? Are you sure you've assessed all the risks associated with your facility? Nonetheless, in the beginning stage of the ACMPR, because you had to assess the risks, a threat and risk assessment was all over the map. Some were good, some were bad, some were too far, some weren't far enough. About halfway through the ACMPR, consultants started to realize, okay, maybe we went too far, maybe we didn't go far enough. Maybe what we represented to Health Canada wasn't good. Maybe the 20 risks that we associated with the site wasn't really making it look very good to Health Canada. So what a lot of consultants did is they started to edit their TRAs. They started to only come up with maybe 5 or 6 risks. But the risks they came up with, they made it sound like it wasn't a big deal. They said to Health Canada, hey, there's 5 or 6 risks here. We're recommending how to fix certain things, but don't worry about it, it's not a risk. Essentially saying, our threat and risk assessment is not really a threat and risk assessment. It's just a risk assessment with no threats and nothing's wrong. So give our client a license and we'll see at the next application. What ended up happening then was that some clients were getting pushback from Health Canada saying, okay, you've identified risks, but you're saying that there is no risk. That's not reality. Everybody has risks that they have to mitigate, avoid, deal with, whatever the case may be, protect against, whatever it is. Health Canada started picking up on the fact that every site has risks. You can't tell us that there are no risks at all. And the risks that you're saying that are present are not an issue. You can't tell us that because that's not reality. Sometimes this was based on a consultant that just wanted to make a facility look good. Sometimes it was based on a client that came back and said, stop making our facility look bad. Like, what are you doing here? You're on our side. Why are you identifying all these risks to make it look bad to Health Canada? So, some consultants, ourselves included, started looking at the TRA to say, listen, we need to identify risks. You just have to. That's what a proper TRA does. It identifies risks. Come up with the mitigation. Come up with the security policy, procedures, protocols around it. Don't make it sound like it's not a big issue, but don't make it sound like it's a huge issue. And solve it logically so that Health Canada can look at that and go, yeah, we kind of agree with that. We see where you're going. We know if something may happen, but you're on top of it if it does. Here's an example. Under the TRAs that I personally have done, we've identified a risk, probably the number one risk is being internal theft. Especially if your security systems are installed properly and designed correctly, internal theft is your number one risk. Some consultants have done the same thing. They've said, okay, we've got internal theft also as one of our risks. We're going to install cameras, we're going to do intrusion detection, we're going to do all these fun things to reduce the risk of somebody stealing something inside one of our grow rooms or inside the vault, whatever the case may be. And they would not be wrong. That kind of a risk assessment is fantastic. It's telling Health Canada internal theft is a risk. It's a reality. No matter where you go, it's a reality. We know about it. We're going to reduce the risk that it happens, but when it does happen, we're going to be on top of it. So under the TRAs that I've done, I've gone one step further. I've said, well, you know what? Yes, let's throw technology at it. Let's throw policy and procedure at it. Let's also reduce the risk of it happening by getting rid of the desire to have it happen, but also get rid of the tools that could make it happen. As an example, we went as far as to say, okay, you need to gown before you go into any cannabis present area from a GPP point of view. Fine, let's make the gowns without pockets. As part of your policy and procedure, as part of your operating procedures that you will articulate to Health Canada, you will state that you will buy gowns that do not have pockets, thereby reducing the risk of somebody putting something in them, thereby reducing the risk of it happening. Yes, technology is good, but we thought outside the box and said, let's throw logic at this. Let's reduce the risk of it happening because we reduce the reality of it happening by removing the one thing that can make it happen. Yes, people could still stuff things in their socks, potentially. Yes, maybe they could put it in their shoes. The point is that you're reducing the risk because you're throwing logic at it. That's something that Health Canada agrees with. Hey, not technology can't solve everything. Policy and procedure can't solve everything. But together, thinking outside the box, policy and procedure, security system designs, mitigation, whatever, does work. Now you fast forward to the Cannabis Act. Keep in mind, under the ACMPR, it stated you must assess the risks of a site. Under the Cannabis Act, it doesn't state that. It doesn't state that you must assess the risks of a site. We know that Health Canada has had lessons learned from the ACMPR. We know that Health Canada is going for a risk-based approach. But they are more so than ever throwing the risk-based approach back at the client. They're saying, you identify the risks, you mitigate them, you show us how you're compliant with the Cannabis Act, but you also show us how you're prepared for anything that may go wrong in your facility. How you're prepared to make sure if it does go wrong, it doesn't go wrong again. What are you going to do if something happens in your facility? Is it a major deal? Is it not a major deal? Is it reputational risk? Is it catastrophic risk? So they have basically thrown it back to the client, more so than the ACMPR. But there is no mention in the Cannabis Act that states you must do a threat and risk assessment. You must assess the risks of your facility. It's almost a given that you're going to do so. So a lot of our clients have asked us, and they said, well, Chris, you know what? You created a TRA under the ACMPR for us. It's fantastic. Our second site, or porting over to the Cannabis Act, do you need to have that TRA reworked? Do you need to have a new TRA written? Is it a requirement from Health Canada? And I always say, it's not a requirement. I have not seen it in the Cannabis Act. It does not state you must have a threat and risk assessment inside the Cannabis Act. However, should you do it? I would say absolutely. Not only does it show Health Canada you're on top of things, but it gives them the warm and fuzzies that you've thought of everything, and they're okay giving you that green check mark and that coveted license. You don't want to leave anything as a gray area to Health Canada. You don't want to say, okay, Health Canada, here's our application, but we really didn't look at anything else. So go ahead and give us our license, and we hope that nothing goes wrong. Doing a TRA sends a very strong message to Health Canada that you're on top of things. You're on the ball. You're looking at everything in the area. You're finding any risk, and you're mitigating it. You want to make sure that you operate for as long as possible. You want to make profits. You want to be a good thing in this industry. You want to be the best grower there ever is. You want to have the most solid business plan out there. A threat and risk assessment is part of your application because you want it to be there, not necessarily because Health Canada is looking for it. If you have any questions about a TRA, if you go ahead and ask, send me an email. There are things you should include, things that you don't want to include, things that you can include that don't seem so not much of a big deal, things that you may include that actually end up being a huge deal if they're not articulated and mitigated properly. Again, make sure you send the questions out by email. I'll certainly do my best to answer them. Make sure you follow us. We have lots of videos that we come out with, lots of informative videos. We do answer questions from clients. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.